Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live event on developing a sensory brand fingerprint. I'm glad you're joining with us today. I'm Greg Stucky. I'm the Chief Research Officer at Insights Now, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think a lot of people tend to overlook when it comes to product innovation, and especially when they're innovating line extensions, and that's your sensory brand fingerprint. Now, if this is the first time joining us, or if you're new to webinars or Zoom, notice that there is a Q&A button. I would love for you to be dropping Q&A in as we're going through this session today. I have it open on my side so I can see your questions. I'll try and integrate them as I get them, but I'm also going to ask you to use them halfway through the session today. So be ready to participate as we go through today. All right, let's get going. Uh, I got really excited when I started looking at data on brand extensions. And one of the things that we've learned early on was 70% of brand extensions fail to survive their first 2 years on the market. I didn't realize it was that heavy. And when I mentioned this to my colleagues at Insights Now, they were pretty quick to say, wait a minute. Don't you really mean 30% succeed? So, yeah, absolutely. That's true. Quit being a negative person. 30% of brand extensions are successful, which makes you wonder, what can you do to be one of the 30% and not one of the 70%? Well, good news is there's data on why those brands are successful. What makes those 30% stand out? Well, the number one reason that those 30% are successful is because they're focused on fit with the parent's brand's core equity. So that core driver of success for line extensions really is that alignment. This means that people saw and experienced a product that they were getting, and they saw the sensorial cues that they got from the past experiences with the brand, and they matched the sensorial cues that they were getting with the line extensions. So there's something about the brand that makes it truly authentic to that brand. So the key is understanding your sensory brand fingerprint, finding those cues that make your brand authentic. What is it about your brand that makes you stand out from the crowd? What makes you so recognizable that people know whether this is truly a good, authentic, in line with the brand, canonical line extension, or if it's off the mark in some way? So let's start by having a discussion, a little definition now of what a sensory brand fingerprint is. A sensory brand fingerprint is a clear definition of the implicit benefits and the associated sensory cues which make consumers intuitively know that a product is an authentically branded product. So the sensory cues associated with the brand become its signature and are the foundation of all the products in the line. Whatever that core sensory profile is, it's critical to build that into all your line extensions, because if you don't, you're going to slowly erode your brand's equity. So when that fingerprint's followed, brand extensions are viewed as authentic. The brand grows and thrives. When you miss the mark, you start to erode the brand. You get negative commentary online, and you miss the mark. You'll miss out on repeat purchases, and you don't accomplish the goal, which is to drive more equity into your brand. So if you don't have that clear understanding of your sensory brand's fingerprint, now's the time to get started. So what makes up a sensory brand fingerprint? Well, there's 6 core parts. You can maybe call them 5. You can put brand relationship and messaging and communications possibly into one group, but you really have the relationship that a person has with its brand, which primarily comes through messaging and communications. You have its design, the graphics, the way it's visualized. You have the brand imagery, the naming conventions that you apply to the products and all the sublines. You have all of the packaging and technologies. Sometimes people overlook the fact that a lot of brand equity is tied up in the type of packaging or the style or the visualization of the packaging or the technology. And then finally, you have the product sensory. This is the sensorial cues of how people experience the product in and of itself. When you get all those pieces right, you accomplish a sensory brand fingerprint. Now, for your fingerprint to be truly unique, because that's the whole point of using the word fingerprint here, is that it's unique, you've got to be able to do three things. You've got to be able to be centered on the core benefit or value of the brand. You have to have a product that contains implicit, that subconscious sensory associations with the brand and the equity or the value that is being promised. And it has to be unique and ownable in some way. If you can't make it unique or defendable, then it's not truly a fingerprint. It's more like an ink blot. You want to be a fingerprint. All right, a little bit of behavior first before we get into some practical stuff, because really, if we want to understand how fingerprints are going to come to life, we have to know how to put them together in terms of making people's behavior work, i.e. continuing to use your brand, integrating it into their lives in a more habitual way. All right, where do we start? We always start by making a product specifically relevant to a moment in a person's life. In these moments, a brand's going to align really well with the context, the person's internal needs, with their external motivators for how they make choices. Then the brand messaging and a person's history with that brand all are going to create a set of expectations about what that brand experience will be like. Now, as that brand expands its footprint through line extensions, they're going to be looking to address tensions and trade-offs that people are making with the belief that by building up equity, the brand's going to be able to drive additional use by addressing those tensions. And then when people experience the product, your brain's going to pull in all your past experience with the product, with the brand, with the messaging that was created. And that's going to set your expectations for how you experience that product. If you have a very good match, you're going to deliver a reward. And that reward is going to help you build the relationship with the brand that you already have. So it's going to reinforce the value and the relevance that brand adds to your life. So anytime we launch line extensions that are going to be successful, we want to make sure that we're connecting all the dots. Now, when it comes to brand fingerprints, there's two pieces that are really the most important parts of these, if you will, or the most unique parts. So the first is that successful brands have to reinforce, they have to position against their sensory fingerprint. So if you're working on your articulation of what this line extension is going to be, how to describe it to the consumers, you typically don't have to tell your brand team that they have to stay on brand with colors, stay on brand with core values. But normally we see companies take a lot of creative license with maybe how the visuals come out, how the language is named, how they talk about or don't talk about the sensory side of the product experience that people are going to have. When those handoffs or those pieces are disjoint from each other, you take a pretty big chance on having something go wrong. So you want to make sure that you're giving guardrails to everybody associated with the brand and how it's being messaged to set people's expectations of what that authentic experience will be like and how it needs to be communicated, and to be able to reinforce the values that the brand stands for. Now, the second part is the reinforcement of the core reward. So this is where we see line extensions fail most often, is that they're not reinforcing whatever the core rewards are. And that sensory experience has to reinforce every single time they interact with the brand, else you're going to lose frequency of use. All right, so quick moment, I'm going to check my Q&A. I don't see any questions yet, but you're welcome to drop them in. We're going to transition now. I gave you a little bit of a background, a little bit of science. Now we're going to jump into an example and have you focus on helping me out, think through a brand fingerprint here. So I'm going to put a picture on the screen, and I want you to be ready to type into the Q&A, what product or brand do you think this is? Are you ready? All right. So start typing. What do you think that product is? What brand is that product? Okay. Starting to get a few coming in. Well, so far, no wrong answers. That's good. That's good. Yep. Yep. Okay. This is excellent. I don't see a single person giving out the wrong answer. It's easy. It's obvious. This is Pringles. How did you know? How did you know just by looking at the product on the screen that that was Pringles? What were the sensory cues? Now, in this case, it's just visual, unless you happen to be sitting there watching this and eating Pringles at the same time, which, if you did, congratulations. But how would you know? You know because there's something about this product that made it authentic to you. It helped you instantly recognize the product. That's the brand sensory fingerprint. And that's what we're going to dive into today. So let me start by showing you a quick little video. So Rachel and Chris from Rach Loves Life, this is her YouTube channel. They take on challenges to see if they can identify authentic products versus store brand products. They're a lot of fun to watch. They're a good mind twinky of a session if you want to have some. But what I wanted you to see is the process that they're going through to try and figure out which product is an authentic Pringles and which one's the store brand Pringles. So let's listen in.
Pick this one to start.
All right.
I wasn't even evaluating them.
You can kind of see through it. Not really. I don't know if I just made that up, but like when you're stacking them like this and then you pick it up, you can kind of see shadows. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up. Anyway.
Might be.
That tastes very Pringly.
These are paler. These are a bit more golden.
These have more of like a texture to them. These look like if they turned them into corn Pringles.
It's also a less perfect.
Oh, that's
way.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Pringle prides itself in the shape. There was like full-on studies. I remember watching.
All right, Pringle prides itself in its shape. That's one of the key elements that they were able to use to identify the authentic Pringle, right? We've got, you could see that the store brand wasn't as accurate with their ability to deliver that same shape. They also noticed differences in color. They further on in the video, they'll talk about the texture, the meltability of a Pringles that they associated with being authentic as well. So if we look at Pringles and we want to understand its sensory fingerprint, let's walk through all the different aspects of the sensory fingerprint for Pringles. Let's take on the first one, the brand relationship and message. If you take a look at this brand and you go through and you unpack all of the elements of this brand, how it's positioned, how it's messaged, what consumers and people talk about this brand, what they identify as core to this brand, you're going to find one thing or a couple of things in very much common in terms of brand relationship and message. First, Pringles is always playful and it's always got impactful flavor. All right. So where does this come from? If you take a look at their website, how are they doing on this? This website, very playful images, right? Even in the bottom right, on the go, still a very happy, playful scenario, right? Impactful flavors. Notice that their flavors, right? They have a whole section that's just the new flavors. They are putting a lot of time and energy, if you will, into the flavor aspects of all of the products that they promote, if you will, through their social media. Okay, so that's part of that relationship and messaging. Some of the designs, what type of design elements, graphic elements, visualizations do they use? Everything is always bright colors. That would be a guardrail, a sensory fingerprint guardrail for them. The shape of the chip needs to be part of the visualization all the time. If we look at their products, you'll notice that they're always visualizing that chip. Every single product that they produce, every canister that they have, every at time that you see Pringles being shown, you're always seeing bright colors, you're always seeing shape of chip. So sticking to those design, graphic, and visualization elements. Going into brand naming conventions, always flavor forward names. All are always a color flavor match as they put flavors out, even in the most basic products in the line, in their classics section or their fan favorites section. There is always a continuity between the flavor and the color, and they name all their products with very flavor forward names. So if you're doing development and you're trying to think through line extensions and you know you have to stay on flavor forward names, color flavor match, that's going to guide you to develop line extensions that are always going to hit the mark. We can go into packaging and technologies, right? Stacked chips. Everything that they deliver is against a stacked chip, or crisp, if you will. And then play, the sense of play with the package. One of my favorite pieces is that they have on their website that 43% of people have gotten their hand stuck in a Pringles can. And they're asking you to share your TikTok with them as well. This sense of play, this sense of interaction with the brand is part of their fingerprint. So as you build a line extension, you've got to build this sense of play into the line extension. If you launch a product that doesn't have a sense of play with it, you're going to erode part of the brand equity that you've built up by always communicating that value. All right, now let's look at the product sensory itself. Perfect edges, we talked about that already. The iconic, I'll call it duck shape of or duck bill shape of the chip. There is a pop of flavor every single time you put one in your mouth. That pop of flavor, even on original, the classic salt oil flavor pops off that chip. And that's a really important piece. And if you were to expand maybe even further, for instance, if we take what Rach Loves Rice talks about, it's that meltable texture also goes into that. And you can see this played out, right? Lots of creativity within the flavor sets. They did the whole stackable series. They have all of their line extensions have drive around that sense of play, sense of flavor. Right. So if we put that all together, a Pringle sensory brand fingerprint would look something like this. So it's playful, impactful flavor, bright colors, focus on the shape of chip, have flavor forward names, do a color match to your flavor always, stack your chips, something always stackable, play with your packaging. So you have to have a sense of play with the product and ideally with packaging. And then do the product sensory, right? The pop of flavor, the meltable texture, the perfect edges, the iconic shape. So let's take a look. If this is Pringle sensory brand fingerprint, let's take a look at some line extensions. Let's figure out if these line extensions are in line with their fingerprint or if they're missing and where they might be missing. Let's take a look at the first one that's in a different canister, right? They still have a stackable shape in their snack stacks. They still have canisters that they show play and fun with in terms of the ability to, fling the chips out of the canister. So if you go and you identify ways to play, this is still a very playful canister. They have, with their packaging, everything is very similar in terms of color, naming, all of that, just a different package. So this one, reasonably successful line extension. Here's a newer one, Pringles mini bites in a bag. So going away from a canister into a bag, not stackable or not stacked inside the bag, and a different size, smaller. Nothing in our equity about that, right? Our fingerprint about that. Is there a sense of play here? How far away are you getting? How far away are you not getting from that sense of play? Is this going to erode the brand or drive the brand forward? Remains to be seen as this is just getting launched, right? What about something in another country? So there's some co-branding that Pringles has done. co-branding with instant noodles over in Japan. So you've got sour cream and onion yakisoba as an example there. And is now here, you don't have a chip at all because now you're just playing on the flavor side of your brand, right? So if we say, okay, the product sensory, the duckbill shape doesn't have to stay, maybe the meltable texture doesn't have to stay, but the pop of flavor is what I'm going to bank on because I'm going into a new format. So here you would have to ensure that you're still doing flavor color match, flavor forward products, and bring that experience to life. And you would have to have a pretty good match between the chip flavor sour cream and onion and the yakisoba sour cream and onion, right? Because people are going to want to compare. Now, interestingly enough, like in this graphic, you'll notice that there is still a chip in the top corner, right? And that right next to Mr. Pringle up there on the left side on the green package, you'll still see they actually still got the shape of the chip shown in the package. You still have the bright colors, et cetera, so forth. So there's a lot of equity that they're pulling in that is going to help keep this fingerprint alive, even though they don't have an actual chip. All right, so enough about line extensions. Let's talk about how do you get it done. So what are you going to do? How do we go about building or developing this fingerprint? Well, there's 3 core steps to getting this done. And you can either take a really quick and easy jaunt through this and qualitatively get it done with really exceptional brands. A lot of that work is probably already done. You may just need to canonize it for your team. For other brands, it might not have ever been done. And maybe if you're suffering as one of those 70 percenters, maybe this is one of the things you can do. So first, it's understanding your core value. Really, what reward do you want your brand to stand for? And how is that uniquely valued on the market? You can do this through your brand pillars research, through value mapping, qualitative exercises of many sorts will get you here. The second piece is you have to identify the sensory perceptions and identify those that are implicitly associated to the brand already and to the rewards or the benefits that they're getting from the product. So you can get this from conversations with brand enthusiasts, so through qualitative exercises or online exercises. And if you want to quantify it through an implicit association test to identify which elements are truly driving that brand equity, right? And if you're quantifying it in that way, if you're really wanting to push the limits of, boy, where can my brand really go? Then getting that quantification into the implicit really is very helpful because it gives you a sense of how far would I have to move my brand in order to get to still be within my fingerprint. And then the final place is creating a plan for delivering the line extensions, which consistently deliver on that fingerprint. So that's putting together a product strategy playbook. This is the communication, the canonization of all this information, and then running activation workshops within your company. It's one thing to have a fingerprint, but it's another thing to put it into action. You really want every single person in your company knowing what that fingerprint is. If you're using outside resources like graphics agencies, design agencies, ad agencies, you want them to also have that same documentation so they know what rules and guidelines, what guardrails do we have to stay within. So your sensory brand fingerprint. Your fingerprint really needs to be centered on your core equity, the core benefit that is home to your brand. It needs to contain your implicit sensory associations with the brand and understanding which of those are unique and ownable by your brand. Again, you can have a fingerprint, but if it's not unique and ownable, it's not yours and somebody else can take it. So you really have to find out which things really stand out as making you unique and making you ownable. All right, that is our session for today. I would love to answer any questions. So I will go over to my questions series here. Anybody has questions, jump over onto the Q&A and I will review any of the questions you've got. Okay, First question up is, do we really have to do all the steps? That's funny. Do you really have to do all the steps? Let me zip back just to show you the steps again, just so you have them in front of you. Do you really have to do all of these to have a fingerprint? Uh, the answer is not really no. You don't really have to do every single part of this. You don't have to have brand pillars research, although it's out there. So if you're a startup and you're building out your brand right now, you do need to know what your brand stands for. And it's very, very helpful to do the last step, which is build that product strategy playbook. So you have it all written down, because as you grow, you're going to add a lot of people to the company. And if they're not perfectly in line, won't get it done. Do you need to have conversations with brand enthusiasts, do value mapping and implicit, do all of those things in 1 and 2? No, you don't. You can just go out and study what people say about your brand right now online and use your intuition to figure out what your brand fingerprint really is. Now, I will tell you, some brands which have a lot of line extensions and are very successful, likely already have this information, but they may not have one or more of the pieces. For instance, it's common we don't see the sensory components, what's the visual, the aroma, the flavor, the texture. None of those are often written down. They're often just part of the culture of the company as to what makes it authentic, but they're often not written down. So getting them written down, I would say, is probably the most important thing you can do. The research behind it, it's pretty easy if you have a really successful brand. If you have a brand that's struggling, maybe it's kind of hard, and you actually do need to do all 3 of these steps in order to get yourself from being one of the 70% to being one of the 30%. All right, let's see. What other questions do we have? Okay. Okay, I've described the fingerprint as a line extension. What do you do if it's a brand new product that is new to the market? And people have lots and lots of brands to choose from. Can I outline that process for a brand new product? Okay, for a brand new product, you definitely have to still understand your market space. So you may mention that there's a lot of brands to choose from out there. You've got to be able to identify something that differentiates you, and you've got to know, number one, as we go around that behavior, what moment are you going to play in? What tension that's unmet are you going to address? Once you get those 2 pieces as a new brand, you can start saying, okay, that tension is going to be my home. Nobody else is addressing it. So I'm going to be able to be unique and differentiated by starting to address that tension better than anybody else is doing today. When you start addressing that tension, you're going to build products, and you're going to go through that creative process of identifying ways to deliver a product that has unique experiences, where you're tying the sensory cues to the benefit that gets delivered. And there's lots of great research methods for being able to do that. We personally use a method called Product Spark, which allows us to identify very creatively ways to connect sensory cues to benefits, find out what's already in a person's brain, and really deliver that to the market. Once you get that, then it's working your way around, building that out, writing that down, instructing the teams how you have to communicate against that in order that you're delivering, setting expectations and delivering on those expectations. Okay, so for the new brands, certainly you have to start a little bit earlier with understanding that space. Okay, what kind of questions are important to ask your brand enthusiasts to identify okay, I'll reread this. What kind of questions are important to ask our brand enthusiasts to identify the perceptions implicitly associated with the brand? Maybe a couple of examples. All right, one of the simplest things I think you can do with your brand enthusiasts is say, how do you identify somebody who's trying to imitate our brand? How do you identify the fakes? And they'll be able to call out things that they've seen that they think are common mistakes that people make. Then you can also flip that around and say, if you were going to build another great product, what is the one thing that it has to be in order to make it be perfectly matched to the ones that we already have. So you can go through that creative. Now that's more of a creative push, and you're going to have to iterate on that a couple, 3 times. You can do exactly what you saw done in the video, which is show people products and have them attempt to identify the real ones versus the ones that aren't authentic, and then work through compare contrast. What makes it less authentic? What makes it more authentic? Now, if you don't really have competitors in your space yet, you can build prototypes that you know are slightly off brand, like, hey, we wouldn't launch this, maybe some of the ones that failed, and you can get good indicators there as well. And then finally, I'll build one last piece on that. If you've already got a product that's on the market, you can look at some of your past research on prototypes that you didn't push forward, figure out what was it about those prototypes that didn't work. Why didn't you move that one forward in the process? Why did you kill that one? Why did consumers reject it? Identify what it was about them and say, okay, these things are critical to get right in our brand fingerprint. So it's like looking at the inverse of your drivers, right? If you have positive drivers for your brand's equity, what are the negative drivers of your brand's equity? So those are 2 places you can go. Hopefully that got to a couple of good examples for you. All right. Well, that is all the questions I see on the list today. Thank you very much for joining me for another live session here at Insights Now. And we will look forward to having you again with us this next month. Have a fabulous afternoon, everyone.